guys ever make something and get angry about how good it came out because now you have a new bar to reach and you were not ready to reach for that bar? That's what this video is. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be making a creature that's very close to my heart. When I was growing up as a kid, I used to have a pet bearded dragon named Charizard. Had him for years. I originally got him fully grown, so I don't know how old he actually was, but I had him for years. He was actually originally named after a Dragon Ball Z character, which I cannot remember. I think it was Piccolo, but I can't guarantee that. But anyways, I'm going to be making a bearded dragon. I've had a lot of you guys request for me to do it, and today is finally the day. So let's get started. Okay, so normally when I work on my projects, I try to get the sewing done first, but the way I ended up recording this, it's just going to make a lot more sense if I do the clay pieces first and then just continue from there. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start on the clay face and then move on to making the clay feet. So the first thing that we're going to work on is we need to make a base for our head, that way we have something to build everything off of. So what I ended up doing was I made a triangle out of tin foil, and we're going to completely cover this in clay. I'm going to get everything completely covered nice and thick, and then I'm going to smooth everything out. Then we can start refining the shape of it and adding details to it. So this is going to be one of those pieces that has glass eyes. I ended up picking up these really pretty ones. I think they're the closest that I can get to something that looks like a bearded dragon eye. They're not perfect, but again, they're as close as I can get. Now, I really like using glass eyes. I just don't tend to order them very often. I'm a little cheap, and I really need to get past that, and I need to start using glass eyes because they do add a lot more detail to my creatures, and I actually really like how it looks. So hopefully in the future I can make myself order more of these and we can start using them in more projects. So I'm going to get my glass eyes in place. I'm going to start building up clay around them to make the eyelids, and then I'm going to use my tools to kind of refine the shape of all the eyelid details and stuff and try and break it up into different scales. To me, the eyelids of a bearded dragon kind of look like eyelashes because they're a little bit spiked. I don't really think I got them too spiked, but I did want to have them defined enough so they kind of had that extra bit of detail. So after I get my eyes into place, I have all the details around them, I'm going to move on to making the mouth. So I'm just going to use one of my tools and I'm going to kind of scratch out a rough design of where I want the mouth to be opened. I'm just going to have a little bit of a crease for it, and I want to make sure it's nice and even, so I'm just going to do a rough sketch of it, and then I'm going to refine the shape by digging into the clay a bit more. Now, one thing you want to do if you want to make a really detailed face that looks accurate is you want to focus on the main details, the eyes, the mouth, and the nose. And of course, if your creature has ears, you want to focus on those as well. You mainly want to get these all symmetrical. If you have an eye that's just kind of in a wrong place, it's going to kind of throw everything off, along with if you have your mouth just kind of like shaped weird. You want everything to be nice and even and symmetrical so that it has that illusion of being natural, because things in nature tend to be very symmetrical. Now honestly, this isn't a rule for everything because adding some detail to one side of the face, like a scar or something, can give a characteristic to a piece that makes it more unique. But if you're going for a basic design and you want to focus on the details of the face, I recommend starting with symmetry first and then moving on to adding more details to it later. So like I said, after we have the shape and the details all in place, we mainly just want to focus on texture and adding more scales to the face. Okay, so once we have all of our details in place, I'm just going to clean up the edges around the head. That way we have a nice clean line to connect this to the body later. And then we're going to bake this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 45 to 55 minutes. And then once that's out of the oven and has cooled, we're going to add a beard to the dragon. Now you'll notice that I didn't add any details to the bottom of the head. I left it very plain, and that's because we're going to be having the beard made out of sequin scale fabric. So I have this really cool reversible sequin fabric that's gold on one side and black on the other. I thought it'd be really cool if the beard could kind of change colors, because when a bearded dragon gets mad or when it's sunbathing, it tends to turn its beard a nice dark black color, and I thought it'd be cool to add that little bit of extra detail to it. So what I did was I made a very simple pattern for each side of the beard, and I'm going to sew these two pieces together. And then I'm going to be gluing this to the bottom of the head and just making sure to get it nice and positioned. I'm also adding just a tiny bit of stuffing to it so it holds its shape a bit more. So I'm going to get this glued in place, make sure it's dried and everything, and then after we're done with the feet, which we're going to work on next, we're going to start painting it. Okay, so our clay feet are going to need a wireframe to build them off of. So I made some very simple wireframes for the front and back feet. Now the feet for the front and the feet for the back are going to be very different from one another because the front feet are more like hand-shaped and they're very symmetrical, and then the back feet, reptiles' back feet are very kind of weirdly shaped. I like them, I think they're kind of cute, but they have like one really long toe and then the rest of them kind of gradiate away from that, and then they have like a random toe on the other side that's super short. Now, other than having a lot more wires to them, these feet are going to be made exactly the same as all my other feet. We're going to cover up that portion where all the wires are combined with a bit of clay, make sure it's nice and smooth, and then we're going to focus on making the claws. So we're going to take a little bit of clay and we're going to put it at the end of each wire, and then we're going to kind of use our fingers and tools to kind of straighten it up to make it kind of pointed like a claw. Once we have all of our claws in place, we're going to put our feet in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably just 20 minutes, just enough so everything hardens and we don't have to worry about bumping it. And then after that's out of the oven and is cooled to touch, we can start working on the bottoms of the feet. So what we're going to end up doing is we're just going to be covering up the wires for the toes, but just the under portion. We're going to take strips of clay, cover up those wires, and blend them into the rest of the clay, and just kind of refine the shape of the foot. This is going to be the basic shape of the foot, and then the top of the foot is going to be scales. So we want to focus on the shape of the foot when we're working on the bottom, and then once we're done with this, we're going to bake it for a little bit more, same temperature, 275 Fahrenheit, again probably just 20-25 minutes, and then we can start working on the scales for the tops of the feet. Now for the tops of the feet, this portion is very simple. You're just layering a bunch of little balls of clay to make the scales, and you're going over the whole surface of the top of the foot. The only thing is, it's a little time consuming because you gotta make all those individual balls of clay. Now when you get to the toes, the scaling for this is going to be really simple, but it's kind of weird because you're not used to doing it this way. Normally you just kind of go in a line, but with this you're going to do a back and forth motion, kind of zigzagging the scales. Okay, so we're going to get all of our scales into place. If we want, we can use our tools to refine the shape of them a bit more, and then we're going to bake these one final time at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes this time. We're going to let all of our clay pieces bake and cool, and then once they're done, we can start painting them. Okay, so I'm going to start on the painting for the face first, and then we'll move on to the feet, kind of like how we did the clay. Now you're probably wondering why I put the beard onto the face before we started the painting, and that's because we're going to go over this a little bit with paint too. Now with painting the sequins, we're going to be very gentle and just go over them very lightly because we don't want to have them stick together. So I'm just going to have a very little amount of paint when we go over the sequins. Now I know the gold looks really pretty, so some of it is going to peek through, but it doesn't look super natural with all the other colors that we're going to use. So I'm going to get everything completely covered, even the beard. We're going to let it dry, make sure none of our sequences stuck together. If they did, we're going to fix it, and then we can start adding our colors to it. So the colors that I'm going to be using are going to be yellows, oranges, and browns. I'm going to be using them very lightly because I'm going to slowly add the colors because I don't want to go really like neon-y or anything. I want to keep it as natural to a bearded dragon's skin color as possible. So for most of my painting, adding all the oranges and stuff, my brush barely has any paint on it at all, and after I brush it into place, I'm going to blend it in with an empty brush. Now for the details that are more sunken in, I'm going to be using a brown so they look a bit darker. So most of the painting is just trying to get the right tone for the skin, and then after that I'm going to let it dry a little bit, and then I'm going to refine some of the scales by making them pop out a bit more. So I'm going to get a brighter orange and just paint a few scale marks onto the side of the face, and I'm going to do the same thing with white and maybe even yellow, I'm not sure yet. Now obviously the face is going to be a lot more detailed than any other portion of the body, so the feet are going to be very simple to paint. So just like the face, we're going to primer all of our feet the same color, and we're going to let that dry. Once that's dried, we can start adding some extra colors to it. So we're going to use the same yellows and oranges, and we're just going to kind of brush over the toes to make them look a little bit darker and have a bit more vibrancy to them. And then lastly, we're going to paint the claws, and I'm just going to go over them with kind of a dark gray. So once we're done with the paint, we're going to let it dry. Once it's dried for a little bit, we're going to mix up some resin and apply it over the surface to help protect the paint. This is going to have to cure overnight, so while we're waiting for that to cure, we can work on the sewing. Okay, so for the sewing, these are the pattern pieces that I drew out to make the body. I've left it as simple as I could, so we have a top and bottom, which are going to be the same shape. Then we have strips of fabric that are going to go down the side, and then the legs are going to connect off of these strips of fabric. So we have a front and back leg pattern. And then I have the pattern that we use to make the beard, and I also have another pattern to make some little dangly bits that are going to go under the beard. Okay, so we're going to start on the sewing. The first bit of sewing that we're going to work on is going to be the top and the bottom. The bottom piece is going to be the same as the top piece. The only thing different is we're going to have a second layer to the top piece. So I want to have some sequence scales going down the back of the dragon. Only problem is the fabric that I'm using is kind of see-through, so we're going to have to layer it with the same fabric that we're using for the belly. So I'm going to take these two pieces and I'm going to pin them together, and we're going to sew all the way around them. This will basically connect the two pieces of fabric together and make one sheet of fabric. That way it's easier to sew with later. After that, we're going to take the back piece that we now have and the belly piece, and we're going to sandwich them together. What we're going to do now is we're just going to be sewing the tail. So we're going to pin everything together and we're going to sew along the length of the tail on both sides. After that, I'm going to take the strips of fabric for the sides and I'm going to hand sew them into place on each side of the dragon. Now you'll notice that the holes for the legs are not cut yet, and that's because these are kind of more of a guess than anything. So I'm going to sew the sides into place first, and then we'll have a better idea if those guesses were correct, and then we can cut the holes for the legs. I'm also going to be cutting open the belly of the dragon so it's easier to work with when we put everything together. Once we have the side pieces sewn into place, I'm going to flip everything right side out, and then I'm actually going to be painting the sequence on the top just to kind of refine the shapes of the patterns and stuff that we have on the back. Okay, so now we need to move on to making the legs and sewing them into place. So what we're going to do first is we're going to pin the leg fabrics together and we're going to sew down the front of them with the sewing machine. After we have the two layers of the legs sewn together in the front, we're going to add these to the body. So we're going to double check where we want the legs to be, and then we're going to cut the holes for them and sew them onto the body. Okay, so we're basically ready to start putting everything together. So I'm going to start stuffing the tail, and then we're going to add a wire frame to the body. So we're just going to run the wires for the legs and everything through the fabric body, and then we can start putting everything together. Oh no. What am I doing? Oh, why am I doing that? No. Oh no, I can't resist. I can't resist it. We're gonna have to do it. Oh, look away. Revert your eyes. Don't look. Ah! Okay, I did it. I had to do it. Why did I do it? Okay. I did it for the detail. Okay, so now that we're past that, let's start adding the clay pieces to the body. So we're going to start with the legs, and we're going to start wrapping them onto the wires for the legs. Once the legs are in place, we can start gluing the fabric for the legs around the ankles and wrists. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we can close them up and stuff them. So I originally made these little dangly bits that I wanted to have hanging on the side of the neck. Well, it didn't quite work out because after I added the head, I realized the head was too big, so they were kind of on the back of the head instead of on the side of the neck. So I ended up taking that off, and then I kind of just adjusted it to where I could sew them onto the side of the neck. So I still got to keep the little idea to add those little bits, but I had to adjust it a little bit. So after that, I took the fabric for the neck, I started gluing it around the base of the head, I let that dry a little bit, and then I finished stuffing the rest of the body and closing everything up. Oh no, I can't help it. I gotta poke the belly. It's too cute. So after I put everything together, I realized I wanted to have a bit more detail on the back of the dragon, so I just kind of refined the painting that I did earlier. Okay guys, and that's how I made a bearded dragon. I had so much fun with this project. I absolutely love it. I'm going to have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so make sure to check the links down below if you want to buy anything. I'm going to make more in the future, hopefully, and I do want to work on a bunch more reptiles because I kind of got inspired by this piece. And if you guys have any suggestions for reptiles or anything, leave them down below. Love to see your guys' ideas. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!